I also took out some of the First Nations licensees, and essentially they look to fare just the same as everybody else. So, what comes from this? Well, seniority effects separate users. So Osoyoos, as I said, they always get the water. Oliver, if they don't pump out of the ground, gets hurt pretty quick. Is this fair? Do we think this way of dealing with it is fair? That's one of the questions we have to get. And that's why so much politics comes in, because we're fighting a lot about what's fair. People who are in the winning situation think it's really fair. People who are on the losing end, not so much. Okay, carrying on. The other point I wanted to make, because First Nation water rights are certainly an issue, and is what we have here what we want in terms of First Nations adjusting kind of the same as everybody else? Is that what the courts will decide if it ever goes to court? I think those are things we have to keep in mind too. Okay, so just to sum up, so agriculture generally has priority over other water uses, but the value of seniority may be somewhat limited by its location because you're sitting there on these tributaries near the top of them, and there's really no junior users you can cut off. Communities, they're impacted differently, and how important seniority is going to depend on where you are. The question I've been emphasizing, is this how we want to manage water during a drought? Now, it's been suggested that we don't manage water this way during a drought. We've come up with drought management plans, and we're going to do it differently, and so everything I've set up here is a bunch of waste of time. Maybe it is. Perhaps I should say, I hope it is, because I hope we all get along that way and can stick to the plan and don't go to court and try and enforce these legal rights. But this is based on what the legal rights say. Okay? I've set it up in my model, and I believe this is the way they would probably interpret it, is it doesn't have to be pushed upstream, but you can demand someone upstream stop using it. Okay, so if there's a junior upstream and a senior downstream, and there's not enough water for both, the downstream senior user can demand that the upstream junior user stop. But an upstream senior user is kind of out of luck because they can't get the water from a downstream junior user. Suppose Penticton could convince the manager that they should move their intake to Skaha Lake. No reason they couldn't pump water from Skaha Lake into their treatment facilities. That changes everything. The point of diversion is not in the Water Act, it's an administrative decision. Points of diversion are moved. They are moved within a stream and sometimes moved between streams, depending on whether you get somehow easier access, lower pumping costs, greater convenience, things like that. They are moved. Well, if you move a point of diversion, my understanding is it is an administrative decision that you have to go through a process. Okay, so you can't just decide to do it. You've got to get it approved. But I did, through this model, just play with that. So suppose Penticton could have a point of diversion movement from its current location to Skaha Lake approved. Now, the approval means there has to be no third-party effects, or at least the third parties don't raise a stink, stuff like that. Well, if they were to do that, Penticton would look like Osoyoos on that previous graph. Because if Penticton's seniority was on Skaha Lake in terms of its point of diversion, then there's a whole lot of junior users upstream. And Kelowna would actually have to give up some water for Penticton in that situation. And again, now, would this ever happen? Would somebody approve that change? After today? Probably not. So first in time, first in right is a drought management system. It's a clear process for allocating water when there is a shortage. Now, are the results a fit for what we want? Well, since we have already tried to come up with alternatives, I think it's fair to say that no, it's not what we want. Are these results fair? Do these results make the best use of water when it's scarce? Well, that's what all the talk about water markets is about. Okay? And is there an acceptable alternative? And today we've been playing with the idea of water markets as an alternative. As Henning very clearly said as well, it's not the only one. It's one of them. But some sort of reallocation, I think, is something we have to seriously think about. How are we going to do it? How are we going to manage when water is scarce? Okay, and since I'm out of time, I'll skip the rest of my slides.